Patreon.com/the Walk-Off Podcast. $4 a month gets you in there.
Okay, so let's take a left turn here. We watched Rafael Devers get that monster deal with the Red Sox, $300+ million, 11 years. And I think that that's really going to affect next year's third base market, right? Manny Machado most likely going to opt out of his contract. And then after him, I think it's pretty safe to say Matt Chapman is probably going to be the most sought after third baseman in that market. So he's going to be coveted. He's going to be expensive. On top of it, I could be full of it here, Jeff, but I feel like the Blue Jays don't really have an internal option ready for next year. Maybe Aroldis Martinez, fingers crossed. Like, it is possible. We'll see how his development goes. What do you think the Jays should be doing with this third base hole for next year? Like, is there any chance Chapman comes back? He's going to be pricey.
Listen, if we're already up against the CBT, if you had said to me, would you approach Matt Chapman about signing a 3-year extension? I would certainly do that. And I think the Jays probably will. You know, they do have some depth in the minor leagues. I really don't quite know what to make of Aroldis Martinez yet. You hear, he needs to develop a little more as a hitter. And there, I think, is an example of a guy that hitting lab isn't going to do him any good. He needs to develop as a hitter and play every day and face guys who are going to throw nasty breaking pitches and guys who are going to throw at him and all that stuff.
I shouldn't say there aren't any options. Like, there are Addison Barger and stuff.
Barger he's an interesting guy to me. I think this is a way where I think you could possibly see, like, I think Addison Barger, Craig Biggio, Cavan Biggio, Santiago Espinal. I don't think all three of them are Blue Jays properties by the end of spring training. I think something happens. I think Addison Barger's a guy who could force his way onto that team. And people I talk to say he could play second base if he had to. So we'll throw that out there. But for Matt Chapman, I know from having a couple of conversations with Matt last year at the ballpark, he's certainly open to signing an extension. Both he and his wife really like it in Toronto. I would think the Jays have to have a discussion with him. I would not at all be surprised if they get a deal done with him.
Wow.
You know, Chris Bassett's a buddy of his. They're really close. Chris Bassett's with the team now. You know, Matt Chapman was a guy that, as the season went on, really started to impose his will in the clubhouse a little bit. I think he's an important guy for this organization, and I can see them getting a long-term deal with Matt Chapman done. And I'm probably going to regret saying this, but I can see them getting a deal with Matt Chapman done before I can see them getting a deal done with either Vladdy or Bo.
It's starting to look that way. I mean, the one thing this front office is,
we're almost at the point. Why do you sign them to long-term? Unless, because they're young enough, unless you're going to buy out 3 years of their free agency, a 6 or 7 year deal. Other than that, why would you? Yeah. Why wouldn't you run this out on a year-to-year contract? I mean, it'll probably drive Bo nuts if you do it. But at this point, where do you start? Who do you commit to? You know, my friend Kevin Barker makes this point. Bo, I think Bo had a better year than Vladdy did last year. And Kevin's point is, what if Bo has another year where he's better than Vladdy? Which is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you change? Because I think in the back of everyone's mind, there's always been this thing: get Vladdy done, get Vladdy done, get Vladdy done, get Vladdy done. Bo has another year where he's your best player in September, and he's a shortstop, and we're all seeing. But I mean, shortstops with one leg. Carlos Correa are getting tons of money, right? So we're seeing where the shortstop market is going. I'm almost at the point where I think you play this out. You play this out and see where it goes. And I know that's going to drive me nuts, and it's going to drive Blue Jays fans nuts. But I think that's just kind of where we are, you know. And I keep thinking about the Toronto Raptors and the freedom that Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster, their front office, got from winning a title. You can literally do anything once you win a title. You win a title, you can do anything. The Jays win the World Series, you can trade Vladdy the next year. You can trade Bo the next year. You know, people will be upset, people will be up in arms, but hey, this is a front office that's got a World Series. Maybe it knows what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I've always kind of kept that. And it's the same thing with the Leafs in this city. I don't know what the hell happens if the Leafs ever win a Stanley Cup. Kyle Dubas may just decide to trade everybody because there is a currency that comes with winning a championship, and there's a freedom that comes with winning a championship. So I've often kind of kept that in the back of my mind. What would happen if the Jays were to go on and win the World Series? Does that make it easier to make a tough decision on one of these two guys at some point? Because I think for the past 2 years, I've wrestled with this idea. How do you get both of these guys signed? And then if you put me up against the wall and said, you got to pick one of those two guys to sign. You're going to pick one of those two guys. We've got 1 7-year contract we can give to a player. Who you're going to give it to? Well, my first inclination is, well, Vladdy. But then, I don't know. What's Vladdy going to look like 4 years down the road? What's Bo going to look like 4 years down the road? You know, and both play hurt, both play every day. So, yes, H's, but I mean, it's not like you're gambling on a guy who's injury prone and a guy who isn't injury prone. You're going to look at Vladdy. You're going to say every year we're going to be wondering, is he going to come into camp in shape? We're always going to be doing that with Vladdy. That's just the way it is. It was the same thing with his dad. So it's a really complicated situation. And I'm, as I said, I'm almost at the point now where I think if you're the Blue Jays, you keep going year to year. But this gets back to the CBT. If you had told me that they'd be close to it and wouldn't have one of these two guys locked up, and here's a guy we haven't talked about really, Alec Manoah at some point is going to want a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
Going to deserve a lot of money. We're here and we haven't taken care of our 3 biggest homegrown guys. It really is a fascinating, it's a fascinating place we're in right now with this organization. It really is.
Fascinating is the perfect word, because if there's one thing this front office has done, it's they have proved to this fan base they will spend money. But the one thing that they have yet to do is that monster deal, right? The $300 million deal, the 10-year long-term big money deal. When we are talking Matt Chapman, and you look at what Devers just got, and Manny Machado is going to opt out and probably just re-up on another $300 million deal is my guess. Do you think Chapman is a $150 million guy? And do you think that it's probably going to take, as a 29-year-old, going to take a 6-year Springer type deal?
I don't know, because
it's so hard with the way money is right now in this league.
It's also, what is he going to give you offensively? I think we know what Matt Chapman is. He's going to hit doubles and home runs. He's not going to have much of an average. He's going to play the hell out of defense. And this is, I want to see how doing away with the shift, whether that increases Matt Chapman's value. I don't see any way it would decrease it, but one of Matt Chapman's strengths is he's basically a one-man shift, right? We saw that this year with Matt Chapman at 30. Basically, he's the only guy on the left side of the infield a lot of the time because he's so good. And there's a value in that. With the shift being gone, does that lessen a portion of the best part of his game, which is his defense, right? That is far and away. I mean, if I say Matt Chapman to you, you're going to think defense. So maybe we need to see how that pans out. I don't know about a dollar figure with him, just because the batting, if he was a guy who was hitting 275 or 280, then yeah. But I don't know, how you would compare him to a guy like Nolan Arenado or or somebody like that. So, but I also think with Matt Chapman, I don't think Matt Chapman's going to undervalue himself, but I also think Matt Chapman's the type of guy that probably wouldn't hold out to make sure he gets that extra 10 or 15 million.
Mhm.
Right. I think being happy matters to him. You know, and again, he likes the city, he likes the front office, he likes the team, he really likes the manager. But I don't know about how much of a dollar value I'd put on him. I really, but I think, as I said, that tells me that they'll try to get something done with him.
Do you think a deep playoff run with the Blue Jays this season would help Matt Chapman come back to Toronto in that sort of a case? Do you think that winning and being that close matters, or do you think,
Or is that just going to drive his price up? And
no, I honestly, I don't think it matters to him. I mean, I'm not saying that Matt Chapman would love to play in Toronto if the Jays finished 100 games out of first place.
Yeah.
But I mean, this team's not going to fall off the cliff in the next 3 years. It's just not.
Okay.
I guess sure.
He came up in Oakland. Everywhere seems like the promised land.
All right.
Nothing is ever 100% certain, but I don't think if you put 100 baseball people in the room and said the Jays are going to fall off the cliff in the next 3 years, I don't think anybody would agree with that. So I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily, it would have an impact one way or another on.
If that is a factor in his decision, you're saying he already buys into that this team is a contender, and it's already okay. Fair enough.
We've talked him enough last year, and Matt is a pretty easy guy to talk to. He's a big roots reggae fan, so we get along very well. Very he really likes it here, and he sees what this team is about, and he's a very supportive voice for the front office in the clubhouse. And you know, and I remember a conversation I had with Buck Martinez early in the year, and Buck was talking about Matt Chapman, and he made the point that it was actually just after Buck got back, and he made the point that he thought that we were going to see Matt Chapman become, his line was, he will be the loudest voice in that clubhouse at some point. And I think we started to see that towards the end of the year. And but yeah, it would, again, coming up with the value for Matt Chapman. I think you at least have to have the discussion with him, though, because if you can get him locked up, that does kind of eliminate an area of concern for you. And especially given the fact that we've already kind of hinted that at some point the rubber's going to have to hit the road with Bo, right? So at least having that sense of stability at third base, and a guy who, regardless of the year he has, is still going to hit home runs and play good defense. I think he makes there's a certain value to that for the Blue Jays.